Okay, now we're going to go from the old school crust punk thing, the hardcore thing. We're going to kind of like take a look at how it morphed into modern day thrash metal music, and not really modern. Again, we're talking about early to mid 80s, all the way up into the 90s, where we really started to see the old school hardcore thing flailing, grindcore kind of turn into a much more clinical, dried out technique, but we're not quite there yet. We're kind of in the middle right here. We're in like thrash metal bands. We're looking at Metallica, Anthrax, and all these bands who kind of took the flailing and they made a little more sense out of it. They added a little more like rhythm to it. So here's example one. This is what we have today as the modern thrash beat, aka skank beat. But here's the first example. So what you have there are three variations on the modern thrash beat. You have the regular thrash beat on the hi-hats with kick diddles underneath it. And then you have another version that was on the open hat over here on the right. This is just a kind of, I like to play a lot of open-handed. Now, the difference between these two thrash beats I'm going to illustrate right here. You have a kick diddle between the right and the left foot. So, Exhibit 1, with the kick diddle. Exhibit 2, no kick diddle. So there you have the kick diddle on the first one, you have no kick diddle on the second one. It was just, they would mix and match all of this. And then as guys got better with their double bass, you would get the double bass version. Do that one more time. So again, what you have is you have this thing being molded here, and eventually it's going to get sped up into a blast beat again. So we're going to look at a couple of different things. We're going to look at old school D beat into the thrash beat, and you get like a lot of ideas of what was going on as bands were transitioning from early Motorhead into early Metallica, Anthrax, Megadeth. So let's take a look at that. So I'm going to go from beat A, which is the old school D beat, into beat 2, which will be our thrash beat. It'll look something like this. So there you have old school grindcore crust into modern day American thrash metal bands, primarily from the West Coast, San Francisco, Bay Area. I'm not quite qualified to talk about the German metal. I'm not German. So just like we did on the earlier punk piece, we're going to look at more at what would happen when they would speed these beats up. And we're going to start looking at a couple of like common things that were used in like the faster thrash metal bands. We're going to, I'm going to pick particularly Anthrax and Slayer here. So we're going to add a lot more double bass, and we're going to bump the tempo up a bit, and you're going to start running into things like this. So what you have there is what I would call kind of a double bass down thrash, because everything is kind of down. I like to use a lot of up and down, side to side terminology. So everything kind of bop, 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 bop. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, right on the quarter note. And then again, what you have is your 30 seconds on the kick drums here. This is something that kind of came into play with Slayer. Because you had a lot of guys that were playing these kind of thrash beats up and down. So I would consider the up thrash beat being the one that we already showed, the snare drum being on the up beat, like this. Boom, bap, boom, bap, boom, bap, boom, bap, boom. Then you had the kind of down thrash beat where you would be starting on the snare and the kick would be following, sounds like this. Or with kick diddles. So naturally, it could only follow that guys would want to push it faster and start putting 30-second notes underneath that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go from the up thrash beat to the down thrash beat to the down thrash beat with double bass, and it looks like this. And finally, to give you a little bit of connective tissue on coming out of the thrash metal beats, more into the death metal thing, it's going to look something like this. Again, it's just the BPM up, up, and you start to see things happening different with your timing hand here. For instance, when you're dealing with the D beats, when you're dealing with, and the thrash beats, you're dealing with 16th notes by themselves. The primary change that happens as we start getting into more blast beats, more traditional blast beats, is this stays the same. But your left hand's going to speed up. Your right foot's going to speed up. They're going to kind of start to catch up with this guy and sort of wrap around with this timing hand, you know. So you have, you know. And to jump ahead, when you look at the basic 2-foot blast, this is still doing the same thing, but everything around has doubled. So where you start seeing thrash beat, punk beat into blast beat is when you start seeing that really kind of flying off the rails, sort of losing itself, proto-blast beats that you had in the old Napalm Death eras. I just wanted to cover the thrash metal thing. I think they had a lot to do with tightening it up and giving it kind of a timing scaffolding, making it really strong and really rhythmically square. And in that case, their guitar players and their vocalists, their bassist, found it easier to play with a really solid timekeeper behind them.